My name is Elizabeth. I am the product director at Simplify Compliance. Thank you all for joining Renewed, which is the open network for specialized subscription, membership, and event professionals to connect, share best practices, solve challenges, and grow our businesses. A few housekeeping items: when you're not speaking, please mute yourself during the presentation. And if you have a question, post it in the chat, but I think we might be able to, with a smaller group, be a little bit flexible with that. Andy, if that's okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And again, this meeting is being recorded, and this recording will be posted on our website within a week. So with that, I am going to do an introduction of Andy. And so Andy is a senior advisor at Collingwood Advisory, a consulting firm based in the UK. He has led the development of a market-leading subscription and information business based on double-digit increases in subscriber usage, outstanding retention rates, market penetration gains, and data-led product development. And Andy also led the team at Health Service Journal that transformed HSI from advertising to subscription-based, from print-centric to digital-only, and from declining performance to a healthy growth. He holds his first degree from Oxford and an MBA from IMD Switzerland. Did I get that all right, Andy?
That sounded good to me.
Sounds good to me too. So with that, take it away, Andy.
All right, thank you. So, okay. So the first thing I can't do is move my slides over. There we go. Okay, so look, I do have a normal publishing job like other people on the call. So 4/5 of my time, I run a business called The Lawyer. And then one day a week, I work with Collingwood Advisory, who help founders to create value in their business and help them exit if that's what they want to do. Right? Very briefly on this slide, like really very briefly, my experience is on the left-hand side, and Jen's on the right-hand side. So The Lawyer does, we call it the business of law, right? So it's not technical regulation. It's about, who's got a strategy in law that's going to work, who's financially performing in law, who's investing in tech, who's building an organization that you'd want to work for, right? All of that's what we call a business of law. And Health Service Journal is similar, but in health in the UK, in the National Health Service. So it's really about, it's not clinical information, although it has a lot of clinicians reading it. It's really about policy, risk, politics, finance, and being a leader within the National Health Service in the UK. And as Elizabeth said, look, I was lucky enough to lead the teams that moved these businesses through quite a curve, particularly from being print-centric to digital. But the biggest thing we did was probably shift the revenue mix from over-dependency on advertising to, in both cases, about half of the P&L was from subscriptions. And that's largely through building corporate subscription businesses or enterprise-wide, whatever you want to call them. I interpreted Elizabeth and Stephanie's brief really widely on the right-hand side because it just said customer engagement, right? So don't look for some overarching kind of narrative here because there isn't one. I just picked out half a dozen things that I've seen my own business do, which have engaged customers, or that I think are really good that I've seen on my travels, right? And hopefully there'll be something in there for everyone, whether you take something away now, or whether it percolates with you, and in 2 or 3 weeks' time, you can put it to work in your own business. So the first one I wanted to talk about was daily or weekly digital habit. Now I get that not everyone, this is quite situational, right? And I get that not everyone needs to have subscribers coming in every day. You can have a subscription business where people visit very infrequently. It's just incredibly valuable when they do, right? I get that. But in my situations with both The Lawyer and Health Service Journal, we've really gone for building this daily or weekly habit. And to give you a feel for that, in The Lawyer right now, we have over 17,000 subscribers come in every month. So it's a sort of classic B2B niche, right? They're very senior people. We don't need a huge population. And over half of them now are on what I call a daily or weekly habit with us. And that's gone up about 25% year on year. So what, you say? But for me, it's it's a powerful kind of competitive moat that we're building around us, right? If you think, when I think about sort of the professionals, like accountants, lawyers, property guys, private equity guys, when you ask them, typically they don't have 10 to 15 websites that they go to every week. No one does that, or very rarely. Most people have kind of four or five maybe websites they use a lot. Right? Why? Because they build habit with them, they trust them, and no one has time to go to multiple websites. So if you're part of that roster, it's actually very difficult to knock someone off that roster once you've established that. Okay, and that's why I think the daily and the weekly habit is powerful. I'm going to show you in some cases people go right through to pricing. So I thought I'd show the example of the Financial Times, which is worth looking at. And then in my experience, I've got nothing against print. It's just the businesses I've worked in. The workflow rhythm has been really dominated, I think, by print. And so building that digital habit has allowed us, whether it's a weekly magazine or even a monthly, it's allowed us to kind of, millstone's probably a pejorative word, but it's allowed us to drop that, right? That's what it's done. Particularly in the case of Health Service Journal, we stopped printing, I think after about 130 years of print, right? Because we've built up such a digital habit. So that's all. I can hear you screaming at me. Yeah, Andy, get on with it. Tell me how I do it, not why, right? And so here's a couple of examples of how. And then for the people who are joining us, please just ask questions as we go along. Otherwise, this is going to be a monologue, isn't it? One of the ways we've done it recently is on the right-hand side there. We call this Horizon. Okay, it's really old school. This is not an app. This is just a newsletter. It's just that all of the content of this newsletter is in your inbox. You don't have to click to go to thelawyer.com, right? It's not like one of those clickbait newsletters where you got the headlines and, to find out actually who they're talking about, you have to click for it. What I like about this, well, there's lots of things I like about this. First of all, our subscribers voted for this. We gave them 10 things to vote for in the Q4 19. We said, we're going to hire 2 journalists. So you tell us where you want us to invest that. And this one won. And so each candidate had a little paragraph describing it. And this was the winner. And it's been fabulous. It goes out at 7 o'clock in the morning. Every single one of them has to have a chart in it. So we really stress this thing about data because, well, opinions are valuable, but our subscribers are saying, we want stuff backed up with data. And anyone on the call who's ever written anything will know how difficult it is to write 500 to 700 words, right? That is really, for me, this is probably the high bar of the lawyer's content. Every single day, the one you're staring at, hopefully, is furlough is in the UK is the government's subsidy effectively to employers to not make people redundant. And what happened in the UK is these law firms, both UK law firms just UK law firms, were paying out pretty significant partner distributions and yet also taking money from the government. And this particular Horizon has caused quite a stir with those law firms. Anyway, look, we get pretty much every day we get 9,000 to 10,000 opens of this newsletter. Right? It's a big deal. It's a lot of work, but I actually can't think of a better way that we could have moved our customer engagement along. And we know that we get incredibly high partnership readership. So at a partner level, we can get kind of 60% open rates on a daily basis. And as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty good going, mate.
Andy, if I can, I'm fascinated by the idea of you letting your subscribers vote. Did you put in format questions, or was it topic, or was it a little bit of both?
Yeah, I can't tell you what mutiny I faced internally with that idea. We literally put a paragraph together on each subject. We could go and invest 2 journalists in looking at litigation trends in Hong Kong. Please vote. Versus Horizon, we described it just like this: 700 words, data-based, in the inbox, 7 a.m. And I actually now can't remember most of the other contenders, but literally we put it on SurveyMonkey and sent it out to subscribers. And now I can recall some numbers. We had something like 750 subscribers vote within the first, half a day. I mean, it was good. From our point of view, that's good engagement and people taking an interest in what we want to do. And luckily, this one won because this is the one that I wanted to do. But it's one of those things where, and I'm sure everyone on the call would have faced that, right? You get quite a lot of resistance to the idea because it's quite a high bar, and now everyone thinks this is terrific, although it is hard work for the editorial team, without a doubt, right? But we hired 2 new journalists to do this. One was an out-and-out data journalist straight out of college, right? It's our first data journalist. So I'm really pleased we did it. And I want to share this. The FT got purchased, didn't it? Acquired in sort of 2015 by a Japanese business called Nikkei. See, I very rarely see stuff in the press now about the FT. It's all kind of gone slightly kind of under wraps, isn't it? But in 2019, in April, they hit a milestone they were really proud about because they hit, which they should be, they hit a million subscribers, right? 75% of which were digital. I mean, hats off, right? And so John Ridding, who's a CEO, was interviewed in DigiDay, and I really like this. Forgive me for asking you to kind of read a slide, but what we call them is actually a good question because technically they're newsletters, but actually they're much more than that. Right? They're mini brands. And he's got one that I read called The Business of Sport, and he's got a second one aimed at my sector, aimed at law, called Due Diligence. And he's right in that second paragraph. They've got real personality. They're not just, they're little mini brands. The newsletter is the spearhead, and sitting above that is the global FT. So I would urge. I'm sure you probably have done this before, but it's been a real success for us in terms of customer engagement. I'm just going to pause for a sip of tea. Okay, this slide is about sort of the metrics that we use, and then I'm going to show a second example of content that's engaged people recently. So like that first point, I'm sure it's familiar to everyone. Typically, the B2B buyer isn't always the core reader, right? My buyer in a law firm is typically some way down the caste hierarchy, right? They've got job titles like research director or procurement or librarian, or they're not the fee-earning partners. And so what we have to do a lot of is huge interference. I feel like I've got a kindergarten heckling me from somewhere.
If everybody can please mute their phones. And John, I'm going to go out on a limb. It looks like you're the only one not muted. So yeah, there we go. All right. Thanks, Andy. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, thank you. We have to do a lot of this work, and I imagine many of you do too, where you have to build the narrative for that buyer because they're not actually the person consuming your content, right? We spend a lot of time doing that. What do we use? In the Lawyer, we use right? We look at the number of subscribers that are coming in. We typically do this on a monthly basis. We get a weekly report, but my team spends time dwelling on it on a monthly basis. The number of subs that have come in, the number of times they've come in, like the visit frequency. So that's that kind of daily, weekly habit thing. Page views, we don't actually pay too much attention to. We definitely look at what content they're reading, and we look at the open rates of that Horizon newsletter that I shared earlier, right? And we do all that. We'll look at particular major organizations. We'll sum up. We've got over 300 enterprises with corporate subscriptions, right? 300 law firms, if you like, vendors as well. But we group them into 9 segments. So the top segment might be, the top 25 UK and US law firms, as an example. So we look at them by 9 segments. And then we also spend quite a lot of time looking at it by seniority job title. Okay. Now, what I like about that is I've just managed to explain it to you in 20 seconds. It's not that complicated, right? It's quite a lot of data. You have to have the tech stack and the Adobe tags and, to put it together, because you're effectively meshing web behavior and content, but it's not, other people take it a lot further. The FT, for example, has a much more sophisticated kind of algorithm talking about dwell times. They look at recency, which is, when was the last time that subscriber came in? We don't do that, right? I'm not saying that's wrong or right. Ours is relatively straightforward. We typically end up printing the thing out on a piece of A3, but we definitely dwell in it. And this is probably the most important part on the slide at the bottom there. Because sometimes those dwelling conversations don't really lead anywhere in particular. There's not often is there a thunderbolt. Oh my goodness, we ought to do X. But unless, in my experience, and I'd be really happy to be intrigued to hear other people's experience, unless you kind of dwell in these stats, no one gets comfortable with them. A lot of people in content are maybe not so comfortable with numbers, right? Is that outrageous to say? And you can't, and actually it does over time. It does a couple of things, particular conversations I remember. It's dispelled some myths. People will say, we're losing out because we're not getting junior lawyers. Well, actually the stats don't really support that, right? It's helped us shift the content mix, particularly towards more content around technology, which is, at last, law is probably one of the last sectors to get seriously kind of grappled with by the big tech players, right? And so at last they're using tech, which is, it's a big disruptive thing in law. So it tends to not be specific articles, but even then, we've got the point I'm trying to make at the bottom of the slide about our brand mission. We say that we're looking for data-rich, forward-looking content. Right? So data-rich is obvious. Forward-looking is because that's just more valuable than backward-looking, right? If I can tell you what's coming up, that's just more valuable. We have this phrase about helping the leadership teams of law firms look around the corner, which is perhaps a nicer way of putting it, right? And so often when we're looking at the content, we'll say, well, what was the best example of that, and how many people read it, right? Are we getting more of these kind of content that we think really hits the high bar? The easiest way, my editorial team, they'll do a lot of things by stealth, and so they should. And so I'm going to show you something they've done by stealth in a minute. But they'll say to me, you know what, Andy, you want engagement growth? We'll put out a scandal story, right? It will be a scandal. It will. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that in law. People doing stuff they shouldn't do, either literally kind of. Sometimes it's white collar crime. Quite often it's leaders doing stuff with juniors that they shouldn't do, right? Okay, now I was, every so often, it's important to have that kind of article, because we do, in the business of law, we're saying, would you want to go and work for that organization or not? However, I don't think, having gazillions of articles around scandal is really reaching the high bar of data-led, content, forward-looking content, right? So you have to do it within the brand mission. Now, having said all that, your judgment here, this next slide is one of the things that got launched by stealth. They didn't tell me they were doing this, right? But at least they came back to me once it started to really build up some engagement. So this is what we've done during lockdown in the UK. And it's literally content provided by subscribers. And yes, it's got dog pictures in there. And yes, it's got pictures of, parents trying to do contracts whilst their toddler is climbing all over them, right? It's got all of that stuff in there called Law Against Loneliness. But this quote is amazing, I think. Look at that quote. I never really engaged with the lawyer much, right? I love the column on loneliness. It's made me feel it's a lot more human than what I thought the lawyer was known for. Now, I didn't know that about, I didn't think we were known as being particularly stuffy as a brand. So I actually think this is really interesting learning for us. And we've had some amazing things that have taken off. We did like in a World Cup where you have like teams in groups and you have to get through the group to get into the quarterfinals, something, right? We put in the UK, barristers are organised in organisations called chambers. All right, you don't have barristers, do you? You have attorneys. But we effectively organised chambers in groups and they had to play each other off. And the only way you beat another chamber was simply whether more people voted for your chamber than the other player, right? It played to people's kind of, innate competitiveness. Right? We had an absolute Twitter storm. And it was and some people were kind enough, there was a tweet about, I know this is just a bit of fun, but you know what? I've actually reacquainted myself with some old pals. I've made a donation for charity. This is exactly what Twitter is for. So I'm glad the editorial team did this by stealth. But it has been, we get a couple of thousand page views a day from this. That's another source of engagement for us. Moving on, unless there's any questions, I think that just about gets within the brand mission, right? I'm just about happy with that. Or maybe we should change our brand mission a little bit. Okay. If there's no comments on that, because that slide was so soft and fluffy, I'm going right back to the hard commercial reality of pricing, right? And I just want to show you, if you've never spent time, you see the URL in the bottom left there. This is the FT's, the Financial Times pages on how they price subscriptions. If you've never spent any time there, I will be astonished if you spend 10 minutes there and you don't think, wow, that's interesting, or that's well presented, right? They're pretty transparent about how they do it. And this is how they do it. They say, we've invented this concept of a core reader, right? And that person reads 9 or more articles a month. Everyone else in your team, you can have them for free, right? If you only read a couple of articles per month, fine, you have it for free. We want X amount of pounds per core reader. That amount of pounds varies a little bit by volume, but essentially they're asking for, £300 to £400 per core reader per year, right? And it's all transparent on the website. Now, that is not, I would suggest, the way that most people in B2B price. But, here's a really, really strong connection to engagement. When I've interviewed people, most people do something, variations on the right-hand side, right? They'll have a fixed price for a sort of size of organization. A lot of people in B2B have differentiated packages. Don't they? They have a standard package of a corporate subscription, but they'll have a premium package, and that's got more product in it, right? And then the very best, which is, I'm not saying we're good at this, which is way beyond what we do. The very best have a product. Typically, I'm thinking of Chemical Watch. Does a really good job here of doing. We know you use our data in your contracts, so we think it's worth X, or we know that if you don't get our update about which chemicals are compliant and which are not, your supply may be cut off. So therefore, we think our data is worth X. They go straight for value-based pricing, right, at their very best. But what we're trying to do in the lawyer happens. We didn't copy the FT at all. We happened just from our own thinking to come up with a pretty similar way to the FT. But now we're trying to combine that with some of the stuff on the right-hand side, just to make it a little bit more kind of formalized. If you're a law firm of a certain size, actually you should be spending the following, right? Last few slides. This gets a little, I think this is really interesting. If it's a bit dry, forgive me, right? Most of us do email marketing, yeah? And most of us even do targeted email marketing. You think of Pardot, right? Part of Salesforce. Someone does something on your site. Someone reads the real estate article on your site, and you can ping them instantaneously off an email, right? Please buy our real estate report, right? What we've been using recently, and I'm not going to plug this, right? If you really want to know, I'll tell you what tech company it is. It's not built in-house. this bit of their tech is working really well. They're a US-based tech player. I wouldn't say we're enjoying the easiest of relationships with them, right? They're very SaaS. They're very, very SaaS, as in, here's the technology, you get on with it. Nothing to do with us, right? It's like, so you implement it, that's all your problem, right? Which we're not so used to. But anyway, their piece of tech, which I think is really interesting, are targeted on-site marketing, right? Let me just quickly have a look at people's heads. Is this obvious to everyone? Is this news to anyone?
It's not news to me.
It's not news. Okay. It's
I mean,
not,
it is news to me. It
is news. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it too. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Phew. Okay, here's how it works, right? You take any of the data that you've got about users, like anything, their job title, their organization, their purchasing history, their purchasing authority, how often they've been to the site, whatever you can gather, right? And you can make what this company call segments out of that. And then whenever someone from that segment comes on your site, this obviously presupposes that you've got a paywall and they're logged in, right? Because it's a subscription business. Forgive me, I should have said that up front, right? We know exactly who's on the site because you have to be logged in to use the site. But whenever someone from that segment comes onto your site, they get pinged an on-site piece of marketing. Now that piece of marketing can be really, really subtle. Imagine just a tiny strap line at the top of the page. It can be really in your face, like a pop-up. It can look like a normal banner. There's lots and lots of different ways of doing it. So a couple of examples, right? We will say, right, we've got a segment called, partners in litigation, and we will know which organizations have or haven't purchased tickets to attend our event. So we will serve a message to say, hey, we don't actually, it sounds a big brotherish, so we don't say, we know you're a litigation partner. It will be a bit more subtle than that, but we'll say, have you seen our event? We thought you might be interested, or something like that. The other example is really fiddly, but before we use this technology, every single person coming to the site who wasn't logged in got exactly the same message. Like we had one vanilla paywall, and actually it was horrible. I mean, it was trying to do 24 things on one piece of paper, right? And if you think about it, imagine like a completely anonymous user coming from a Google search. They should get a different message, shouldn't they? From, in my example, new partner joins White & Case. White & Case are a corporate subscriber of mine. That new partner should get a different message, right? They should say, hey, we think you're from White & Case, which is really good because if you just click here and register, we'll get you straight through immediately to access all of our content, right? Different message from the pond skater from Google. What are the results? Okay, it looks really good, but anyone better at me at maths knows there's, these percentages can be tricky, right? But we're getting something like 10 to 100 times the click through. Now, I'm going to really bore you with some examples. We could serve, I'm talking about against a house ad, right? One of our normal house ads saying, please come to our events. You could serve 100,000 house ads. That's not unusual, right, in a month, right? You might get 100 leads from that, 100 click-throughs, right? So in that example, if my kindergarten maths is correct, it's a 0.1% click-through, right? With this technology, we're serving 1,000 messages, ads. We're getting 100 click-throughs, which is a 10% click-through rate. Now you're saying, big deal, Andy, on both examples, you only got 100 leads, okay? But, two things. One, it's not working out always that way. I'm just recognizing the fact that it could work that way. But on the other hand, I don't want 100,000 serving of the same house ad. It makes my site look dull. So this appears, it's early days, but this targetedness looks like it's engaging people. And that was it. I'm really happy if there's any queries or comments.
This was so excellent, Andy. I feel like you've like followed me around for a few days, solved problems that I'm having, and have answered a lot of things that I've been thinking about. This was really, really great.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Andy, I had a question. Could you flip back 2 slides? No, maybe it was before you started talking about central banking. So maybe
Okay,
yeah, it was,
this one. Yeah.
yeah, it was this on-site targeted. So this is serving at personalized ads on the site.
Yep.
Does this capability, this frustratingly American SaaS tool that shall remain nameless, does if I'm inferring correctly, does it also tie into emails? So can you ping follow up people after, or is it just on the site?
Yeah, this frustratingly American tech company has at least 3 components to their stack. Right, the first is this the on-site marketing. Right, now we've been able to layer this over and above our existing identity management system. I'm not sure, there's not a universal word, is there, for that piece of kit? Some people call it identity management. Some people call it user access. What would you call that piece of kit?
I might be behavioral, analytics.
Yeah, whatever it is that manages your paywall, right?
Right.
Okay. But this tech company, so we've been able to layer that over our existing system that manages our user IDs and the paywall. This company also provides that bit of tech, the user ID and the paywall piece. And then third and finally, this company has their own email broadcasting tool, right? Essentially, a replica of, or a replacement, if you like, for, I don't know what you use, but something like Exact Target, right? And their perfectly sensible claim is, look, if you put those 3 pieces in one, from one supplier, it's just a lot tidier. You can do things. We haven't looked at the email piece yet in any great depth, but they've got some claims about being able to personalize the emails and personalize the content that's in the emails and so forth. And logically it stacks up to me that if you want to have those 3 bits of kit from the same supplier, there must be some further juice that you get out of it compared to what I'm doing, which is just the layer that goes over my existing paywall system.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, we certainly find when I look at what drives the when I'm attributing sales, the last action by a long shot for us is email. So that's where we go. But that being said, our on-site marketing is so it's hard to tell if that's self-fulfilling, but having the email and the on-site marketing work tightly together is seems to me the ideal. So
and to your point, within their middle piece, not the on-site marketing and not the emails, but in that user access piece, there's a lot of analytics right off the shelf, attributing analytics of your e-commerce, right? So we're looking at that and thinking about what that could do for our business, because I mean the reality is, I think all of us, I suspect we're not the only publisher in the world who's we've simplified our stack over time, but we're using suppliers for some time now, and one of the joys of SaaS is, of course, that it can be rapidly developed, which is what these players have done, and they probably do have some stuff which would actually be of benefit to my business, right out of their box.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, I mean, of course, you imagine, there's quite a lot of. I was probably unfair to them earlier. It's just that.
We won't tell.
Yeah, there's not like there's you have to have developers and you have to have data migration people on your side of the fence. If you don't have that, this isn't going to be easy. Right? So it's not for it's not outrageously expensive in my view. It's very, very good value for money. But it's not for the very smallest of organizations, because they wouldn't have, I would suspect they wouldn't have that kind of dev team and data team to make the most of it.
Yeah.
Andy, Robin has submitted a question that I had, and actually it looks like Warren had it too. Could you talk a little bit more about the tech that underpins your metrics and reporting systems? I think probably going back to one of the first slides with the editorial.
I can talk a little bit more. We'll hit the cliff edge of my understanding pretty soon, I would think. It's not that complicated. We have that bit of kit which I just described. There must be a noun. I need a noun for that. We have the user identity management technology, right? Okay, and what that does is it gives to every subscriber, or indeed every registered user, a unique ID. All right. Okay. And then the second big part of the stack is just Adobe. All right. And Adobe, in layman's terms, is saying, well, who read what kind of content? All right. Now, those two systems talk to each other through using this unique ID. So you can actually say, okay, user ID 123 read the article about real estate. And then if you want to, you can say, well, we know that user 123 is a litigation partner, and we actually know their name, etc. But when we're not terribly interested when we're reporting in terms of their names, but we'll say, they're actually from a US law firm in London, right? So it's two bits of kit, your identity management, and in this case, Adobe Tag. That's as soon as you start to do content by individual, you can imagine you're building up quite a big pile of data. So that stuff goes into a piece of middleware, a SQL database. It's literally, in my business, called the marketing middleware bit, right? And that marketing middleware bit does the complicated crunching, and it outputs that into Power BI, right? Which is just a basic bit of Microsoft, yeah, for dashboards. And in my case, an Excel. All right, that's it.
I think that's important too, because I think one of the barriers that I hear often of people saying, well, we can't track KPIs because we don't have this system, we don't have that system. There's a million different reasons why you can't do it.
Yeah, am I allowed one quick anecdote? I don't want to bore anyone who's heard this.
Yes, you can have two quick anecdotes.
So my big learning from Health Service Journal was about the power of usage, right? Was about usage. So day one, I walk into the lawyer, and I was, talking about usage from day one. And the first time I met the team, there's about 50 of them in the room. I gave the whole speech about, look, the beauty of a subscription business is the renewal. To get the renewal, you need the usage, all right? And they did that whole speech, okay? And in some of our products, we knew if we had someone using it at the end of day 30, the renewal was in the bag in 11 months' time, right? I did that whole speech and I said, okay, now you just heard the new MD tell you how important this is. So everyone put your hand up if you think usage is now really important. Now, of course, 50 hands went up. I know I'm rabble, but I'm playing the crowd. I know I am, right? 50 hands go up, and I said, right, you keep your hand up, please, if you spend more than 5% of your time on usage. And every single hand went down, apart from one guy. And it happened to be a guy. It didn't need to be a male, as it were. And that person was my sole, at that time, walking into the business, the sole subscription salesperson, because he had to go in front of customers and talk to them. He'd made it his job to create this Mickey Mouse Excel, right, with usage on it, because he had to have some way of kind of talking to customers. So I said, you look around the room now. Now we are going to change that. In my head, I actually thought it would take me about 6 months to change it. I was thinking, oh my goodness, right? But at least I know what to do this time. I just know it's probably going to take 6 months to build this analytics. Okay. I said, we are going to change that. That is one thing that's going to change. And it has changed. It really has changed. The joy, if I just finish the story, the next day I went upstairs to the central data team with my 6-month shopping list thinking, I know what I want. Okay. I know you haven't got it, but can we get cracking? And they said, oh, hold on. We've got that stuff. Hold on. It's over here. No one looks at that stuff. We've got that. Yeah, we built that too. It was lying around. I mean, I'm not joking. It was lying around. It was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary. And that's the difference, if you like, between a mindset I don't think subscriptions is some holy grail or rocket science. It's not. But these people would have been operating in a advertising and an event mindset, and hadn't sort of seen what the other world looks like, right? Isn't it? And most of them made a journey. I'm absolutely adamant about. Very, very few people in my experience can't make the journey. It's just you need to know what you're looking for. Right?
I think that's probably the case with it's your point of dwelling in the data ties this all together, because I think a lot of us have that data. We just, to your point though, it's just kind of, we may look at it once or twice a year, and we're not making an organizational goal to spend time with that.
Yeah. I know there's a bit that I now I'm used to it, but even in those conversations, there's a moment where you can sense, well, this conversation is not going to come to a conclusion. And actually, most people don't like that. They don't like that kind of event. And the point of the last 10 minutes of your life is the following. And actually, I've got to the point of saying, well, that one kind of went down a cul-de-sac, didn't it? Interesting, though. We'll do it again next month, right? You have to be prepared to say, well, actually, no Thunderbolt came from that. But often, like the examples I gave you, either on the content mix or on particular segments where we're not doing well. And then you have the conversation. And the joy, of course, is people will say, oh, why don't we do X? And it's like, actually, that could be a great idea, right? But you have to allow people to dwell in it. And you have to, I think, as the leader, I have to be prepared to accept and say, don't think that came to any great conclusions this time round, right? And be comfortable about that.
All right. I am not seeing any other questions in the chat group. While we have Andy, does anybody else have questions or thoughts?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, it's Warren. What was the Adobe product you mentioned? Sorry, Adobe Tag. Did you say?
I'm sorry. Our articles are tagged with Adobe tags. Sorry, it's a bit clunky way of saying it. Okay. Quite what the Adobe system is, precise Adobe system we use, don't know. I mean, some people have Google tags. We have Adobe tags. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, Google tags is what we use.
Yeah, I mean, some people use GA. We happen to use Adobe.
Okay.
Ed, are we outnumbered by the Brits in this program?
We are.
Yeah,
which is good.
This is an excellent experience for us. I see Stephanie. I think Stephanie's trying to.
Sorry, I'm interested, Andy, in the journey. Your first slide said the journey from effectively sort of print and advertising based, which is pretty much where we are now, to subscription and digital. Every time I try to bring this up in conversation, I'm met with stony faced. Well, we can't do that from the entirety of my senior team, and I'm really struggling to make the first step, and actually don't really know what to do first that will convince at least one or two people to come with me on the journey. Wow. Have you got any suggestions for that?
Because they're wedded to the print, right?
Yeah, I think still a lot of our revenue comes from effectively print advertising. I mean, it sits in the magazine, and therefore any suggestion I make that, oh, perhaps we shouldn't print as many issues of a magazine or as many whatever you just met with, oh, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And therefore then that stops the conversation before you can start it.
Yeah. And you've got a website running in parallel with that, right?
Yep. We've got 6 different products with 6 different sites, basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, there's no silver bullet.
I know that.
There's most of the editorial teams that I've worked with, many of them, and I really get this, there's an emotional attachment to the product of print. And particularly if it's dominated your work rhythms for, 5-10 years. On the other hand, whilst most people, they love the feel of the thing, they like kind of the smell of the thing, right? Most of them, when you talk to them, will accept that it really is a millstone.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got in Health Service Journal, we had a weekly magazine, and everyone on the call will know this. I'm not sharing anything that is new, but it's just things would get held back because we had to have a good cover for the magazine. or we didn't want to launch that story until publication day. Nonsense, isn't it? As in a mobile, agile, digital world, it's nonsense. And I think just over time, I mean, I'm struggling to think of what really created the shift. It probably, actually, if anything, I'm going to say Alistair, the editor, I just woke up one day and said, you know what, this isn't working for me. This, we're actually behind the pace because of the cycle that print demands. But luckily, we were starting to build digital. So the first step, maybe this will help. The first step was not getting rid of the magazine. Like, the first step was just, you have to publish digitally first, right? So whenever that story is ready, it goes, right? Whenever it's ready, it goes, regardless of the magazine. And therefore, the magazine did, after a couple of months, end up being a scoop up of the last 5 days' best digital pieces, right? Now, that is quite an important first step. And it's an important first step because it means everyone is now focused on digital, right? And getting the story out. And then secondly, of course, naturally people start to say, well, what's the point of the magazine? It's just scooping up. It's just kind of scooping up the last 5. People make that mindset change incredibly quickly. So maybe there's some encouragement there. You may feel that you're up against a brick wall. It was astonishingly fast for me. Once we decided, with Alistair, the editor, really pushing, we're just going to publish online first, regardless of the magazine. And then last, can I tell you this story? This is when we actually came to remove the magazine. We were phoning single subscribers, and we were, I mean, this is the dark secret of subscriptions, isn't it? I mean, how often do you communicate with your single subscribers? Sometimes not very often. Why? Because you don't want to wake them up to the fact they've got a subscription, right? I'm not proud of that, but I'm proud of the fact that we basically built a corporate subscription business, right? Really, really, really well. But when we came to remove the magazine, we had to go back to single subscribers and say, hey, we're removing your magazine. And because you're from the UK, right? In the UK, a digital-only product gets value-added tax. So, hey, we're removing your magazine, and you're now going to get 20% tax. And just to make the conversation really tough, we said, and because we haven't spoken to you for many years and haven't put your price up, we're also going to put your price up as well, right? It was a heck of a conversation, right? Imagine that pitch. But because of 2 things, it went incredibly well. And the 2 things were, one, we phoned people up and said, you're one of our customers and we haven't spoken to you for a while, and we were just really grateful off the bat. We treated them like customers. And secondly, by that time, the vast majority had this daily or weekly digital habit with us. It was actually, a lot of people just said, some people were saying, why didn't you do this ages ago? I hate the FUD, from an environmental point of view, I hate the FUD when it hits the floor. There are lots of reasons people didn't want the print. But we were only able to have such success with the removal of the magazine because we built up the digital habit. And building up the digital habit, the first step has to be online first.
Can I ask a question, Andy?
Yeah.
About sequencing, because I guess there's 2 big challenges that lots of publishers I work with have. One is this less print, more digital, and the other one is charging for digital. So when you were doing all this change at the Lawyer, did you start charging for digital content first, or did you start moving print to digital first? If that makes sense.
In 2016, a paywall went up on the Lawyer for the first time, and it went up
on the digital. Yeah.
It went up both on the digital product, and it went up on the magazine too.
So you do that. You put the paywall up first, on digital, and then you gradually shift the content that was in print to being digital first, so people get used to
Actually,
reading it.
no. Sorry, you're right. No, when the paywall went up on digital, it wasn't like there was suddenly a whole, there was already a well-formed digital amount of content, right? It was about a year later when we moved from a weekly to a monthly magazine, right? But it wasn't that we were sort of suddenly taking content out of the magazine, putting it digital. That was already happening. So from the start of the paywall, there was a well-formed digital product, right? I mean, there would have to be, wouldn't it, in order to ask people to charge for it. I happened to join in 17. They put the paywall up in 16, and the reason I was invited to join was because not everything had gone brilliantly, frankly. The classic problem that they had, which many publishers have, is, of course, well, how much do you charge, and not being bold enough about it.
Yeah.
So when I arrived, we had these law firms which were using the site incredibly extensively and were paying peanuts. And that's, so a lot of our issues have been these great meetings where you go with your scatter graph and say, you see all these blue spots, right? They're over here. You're the red one. You're the red one down there. I know it's bad news, but you pay us less than anyone else, right? These are not easy conversations, but we use a lot of stats, and we do it in a pretty professional, considered manner to say, look, you've got incredibly high usage and a low price, and that doesn't work for us anymore, right? But we spent a lot of time doing that because when they put the paywall up, they simply weren't bold enough, and that's easy to say with hindsight, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Easy.
No, I think it's really interesting, the sequencing, because I sort of, I kind of did some work with the Royal College of Nursing standards, and they kind of also followed that sort of sequence in that they were subscription print publications. They create a whizzy new website, and part of the challenge I had when I was doing some work with the editorial team was persuading them to put stuff on the website first and then put it in the magazine later. And that was a big step for a lot of people, as you've explained in your situation. So they did that, and then they kind of got used to the website, and the readers got used to the website. And then about a year later, they said, not quite sure why Nursing Standard needs to be fortnightly. Maybe it could be monthly, and it went monthly. And so they sort of kind of persuaded the readers to consume content on the website, because they persuaded the journalist to put it there first.
Yeah, exactly. If there is an appetite for digital, then the purpose and the role of the print product kind of withers over time, doesn't it? But it's very situational. I don't know. Let's think of some architect, titles. If I were running an architect brand, I suspect I'd be wanting print to remain forever. Why? Because it just, it's beautiful and it's part of the, or design-led business, right? Whereas law and the health service, it doesn't need that, right? So much. So I think it's quite situational. I don't know.
Exactly. And I think another publisher I'm sort of associated with, British Journal of Photography. Long time ago, it used to be weekly, and about a year ago, it was monthly, and they put a lot of content digitally. But it's mostly about the monthly magazine. Had exactly this challenge about the magazine tends to lead the editorial team. And what they have just done, and I've sort of been nudging Mark on this for at least a year. What they have just done is they've moved from being monthly to being 6 times a year. They've doubled the cover price. They've kept the subscription price the same. They've increased the pagination because it's a beautiful magazine with beautiful photographs in it. But they've also created a digital subscription. So they've made that kind of shift, but it was a challenging conversation with the editor. But I think what they're doing is they're now delivering their audience something very beautiful and collectible 6 times a year rather than 12 times a year. They're saving a lot of money on print. and they're starting to earn some money on people getting a digital only subscription who don't want the print. So you sort of check. Yeah, I think you're right. People, once your digital offering becomes good, people kind of go, well, what do we need this print for? Quite so often, it's nice to have, but what is it for?
So I'm gonna jump in here because do want to be mindful of everybody's time. This was
Sorry.
absolutely excellent. I'm putting a poll up on the site right now. I hope that worked. This is my first time doing it. If you can just let us know how we're doing it. Thank you all for joining Renewed. This was absolutely excellent. I learned a lot. Again, we've recorded this and it will be up on the website probably in about a week. We've got some upcoming events next Tuesday on the 24th. We've got an On the Offense with John McGovern and Piers Byrne about valuations, mergers and acquisitions, exit strategy planning. We've got an early December program on the 8th about consultative selling with Katie James. And we have our 4 monthly roundtables in December. So we've got content, product development, marketing, events, and On the Offense. So visit renewed.net for dates, details, and more information to register. And if you're not a member of our Slack group, you can join at renewed.net. Thank you guys so much, Andy. This is absolutely wonderful. And we hope to see many of you in future programs. Thank you.